The burden of performance for a man is very high, and you don't want to disappoint people. So you lie to cover it up, but eventually the truth comes out.
Today we have Kelvin Davis, the author of a book called Be a Good Man, Not a Nice Guy.
Everyone saw him as the nice guy, but in private, he was living a double life, hiding a truth that could shatter everything he's built.
When a nice guy feels a boundary, they're like, oh my God, the relationship is over.
The huge thing about good men is that they are able to set relational boundaries, no matter how hard that might be. People know I cannot cross this line. And if I do, there is a consequence. I was spending like $150 a month subscribing to girls that I don't even know their names. I'm sitting on my couch and I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck have I done? I have to take this diabetic medication 3 times a day. I decided to go to therapy. I was like, I need another person to talk this out with. When I did that, and I was brought to the attention that I had nice guy syndrome by my therapist, and he was explaining it to me, I said, damn.
How do you start to really make that transition and break free from the nice guy trap?
I think the start of breaking that nice guy trap is...
Hello, welcome back to the Men's Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Marc Azoulay, and I'm here with Kelvin Davis. He is the author of a new book called Be a Good Man, Not a Nice Guy. And we love talking about nice guys on the show. I think it is one of the most important conversations that especially modern men need to be having. So, Kelvin, thank you for coming on and continuing the conversation with us.
Thank you for having me, Mark. I'm excited to be here, brother.
Yeah, so let's just dive right into it. You know, we've talked about nice guys a good bit, but for people maybe just joining us or people getting a different perspective, how would you define a nice guy? Like, what are the kind of typical symptomology or typical patterns that a nice guy exhibits?
Nice guys are usually performative. They use their act of niceness as a form of reciprocity to get any kind of praise, validation. They do it out of fear of rejection. They do it often to avoid conflict, and it comes from a disingenuous place. Whereas a good man is the like opposite of that, where he uses his motive to be purposeful, and he uses the act of kindness, which is completely different from niceness. Kindness has a purpose and is usually aligned with your morals, values, principles, and usually backs up your true character and your integrity. And usually a good man never jeopardizes that, no matter how challenging or adverse that situation may be. But nice guys tend to fold under pressure, and they tend to use, their form of niceness to just avoid things that are very important in this life for you to grow as a man.
Yeah, that's really well said. And what I'm hearing is like the nice guy, it's so flimsy. It's so fragile in many ways. And I think it comes with, those covert contracts where if that person doesn't, complete their side of the transaction, there can often be a lot of anger and rage and resentment. The nice guy can turn pretty mean pretty fast.
Oh, yeah. You see it a lot in the dating world. As a former nice guy, I never would get angry. I would get resentful. I would always get in a bout of self-blame and trying to play this victim card of I'm just this nice guy that nobody likes, right? But when you boil down to it, a lot of the times, the reason why you feel that way is because your act of niceness is not genuine. You're like taking this girl out on a date, you're quote unquote love bombing her, you're doing all these things in hopes of maybe being invited back to her apartment, her dormitory, or wherever it may be, right? And when she doesn't do that, then you feel like you've been slighted because you spent money on the date, you've been a gentleman the entire time, you've done this, you've done that. But when you're a good man, you're like genuinely not concerned about what your kindness, what kind of reciprocity comes after that. And, I've seen a lot of nice guys turn to no more Mr. Nice Guy very, 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 very fast. Like, when they try to court a girl and the girl's not interested, all of a sudden the girl's fat, she's ugly, all this other stuff now. But it's like, she wasn't all that when you were love bombing her and wanted to get into her pants.
100%. Yeah. It's built on so many lies and so many of these like secret agreements. If I take you out, if I pay, if I say all the right things, if I do the stuff I learned on a YouTube video or whatever, right? Like, then you're going to sleep with me. And women can like sniff that shit out, right? I mean, they're so aware of liars, frankly, right? And people that are trying to con them.
Yeah, they're very intuitive. And I would say that, as obviously a former nice guy, I dealt with a lot of that. I dealt with a lot of women that would call me out on all of my bullshit. And it's like, when you're a nice guy, you try to avoid that. You try to be like, oh no, like that's not what I meant, or this is what I was trying to like do. And it's all a huge mask. And one of the other things about nice guys is that they can only do this for an extended amount of time. Eventually the mask falls off and their true colors actually come out. So if the nice guy does win and he does court this girl, he does start to date her, as the relationship starts to get more and more serious, he gets less and less consistent. And it's hard to maintain that level of intimacy and love bombing and this sense of what you created for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right? It's very, very hard. I mean, it's even hard to do it for 3 months, but let alone doing it for like half a year or close to like, an entire year. And women don't want to deal with that. Women want to deal with the man that can be consistent, a man that maybe doesn't show up a lot in the first months of the relationship because he's driven by his purpose. He's very career driven or whatever it may be. He doesn't put all of his eggs inside of the relationship basket. He has other motives. He has other things that he's doing. And that is very attractive to women. I mean, a lot of women don't want to be the only thing that you focus on. Nobody wants that. I mean, it's too much. I mean, it puts too much pressure on the relationship, puts too much pressure on yourself, on the girl. It just never works out positively.
Dig into that a little bit. If you were talking to like a young man, maybe in, high school, college age, right, that's going on his first date. Because I think guys get tripped up, right? Because especially with a lot of female friends, women will tell you that that's what they want, right? They want to be number one no matter what. They want a guy who's fawning over her. They want a guy who is always doing those like big acts, like the roses and the mixtapes and the big vacations, like all this stuff. Like they tell us that. But I think what you're saying is true. They don't actually want that. And in fact, I think they lose respect for you if that ends up being who you are, and they don't trust it, right? Because they're like, oh, this guy doesn't even know me. Why is he spending all this money on me and doing all this fancy stuff? Like, I've only talked to him for like 3 hours, like it's too much too fast. It's a love bombing. So yeah, so kind of bring it back. It's like, yeah, what would you say to somebody trying to go on a first date or a first couple dates on how to do it from a good man perspective versus from a nice guy perspective?
I would tell them to go in with the expectation of getting nothing. Right? When you go into something with zero to no expectations, it's very hard for you to be disappointed, right? Because you have no false narrative. You have no pre-consumption of how things are supposed to go, right? Now, granted, you want the person to be kind. You want them to be nice, right? And generally people are when you show the same type, right? But if they're not, and if you don't get a hug, or if you don't get a second date, if you don't get a kiss, don't be upset about that. So I would tell them, you genuinely, and I tell all guys this, don't date if you don't have money. Don't date if you don't have money. If you don't have money, don't date. Because what ends up happening is, no matter what your motives are, if you are down to your last $500 and you spend $150 on dinner, even if you come in there with no expectations, just the fact that you spent $150 and you didn't even get a hug is going to piss you off, right? So to avoid that, make sure you have enough money that if you blow over $100 on a date, that it doesn't really bother you. That's number one too. And and obviously the expectations. And then the third thing I would tell them is to not be fearful and to be their true, authentic self, right? Like if you have a stutter, just roll with it. If you have, any kind of like flaw, right? Just roll with it and don't really make it a part of your personality, but don't actually try to hide it either. And don't try to show up as this perfect man who has everything like that's lined up from 1, 2, and 3, right? Like you want to show the real human version of you. Because I know when I got divorced in 2021 and I started dating again for the first time in like 10, 11 years, right? I had to show up as my authentic self. And I have like a slight stutter and, I get nervous every now and again. But it's instead of me thinking that this person's going to like think that maybe lying or maybe I have like a problem because I stutter, I would just stutter over those words. And honestly, a lot of girls found it cute. A lot of girls were like, I actually like it, like kind of like when you stutter, like it kind of makes me, feel more human. It makes me feel like we're having like a real genuine experience. And I like that.
That part, I want to cue that up because I think that is such a big misconception about women that young men don't get. It took me years to understand this, right? That like they want authenticity. They want all of us. They want like the good, the bad, and the ugly. No matter what we have, they want as much of us as possible, which for a lot of guys is actually kind of scary because we don't want all of us. There's parts of us that we're like, I would just want to pretend that doesn't happen, and just be happy or be successful or be strong all the time. And I think when we try to put that forward, like just the perfect version of us, you can only go down from there. And kind of like you're saying, you can keep it for a few months, maybe even a year, maybe a couple of years if you're really good at it. But at some point, you're going to fall off that pedestal, and then that woman is going to feel betrayed. So if you can speak more to that authenticity piece you keep bringing up, right? And the fact that, women want every part of us. I think that's hard for men to really understand because you got to be right with yourself, right? You have to be confident to show a woman all of you.
When I mean flaws, I mean dark flaws too. I was addicted to porn and I was subscribing to a lot of OnlyFans models, right? And that was a truth that I had to not only accept and admit out loud, but I had to obviously, take that and physically work on it, right? It wasn't like it didn't happen overnight. And I had to tell people that I was dating, right? I told them because a lot of them would ask, why did you and your ex-wife get separated? Like, why are you guys not together anymore, right? And, you don't want to go into like the whole long story about this and that, but, I would just tell them like we're both very good people who were bad for each other. So we ended up being bad for one another, which is true. But there is a lot of fault that I take in the demise of our marriage, with me not being completely truthful about some of my vices, seeking outside female attention occasionally, like obviously watching pornography, all those different kind of things, right? So you have to accept those dark flaws too. And those dark flaws, when you're able to admit them out loud, live them in a true, authentic way, and bring it to a table and say, this is something that I've learned about who I am, and this is what I'm trying to fix and work on. So the next girl that is a potential wife for me doesn't have to bear the burden of these vices, because I'm going to work to be a better man, right? And you have to tell them up front, I need somebody that's going to be patient, somebody that's going to have grace, somebody that doesn't judge, somebody that is quick to understanding and slow to anger, right? And that's very, very hard. It takes a lot of work. What I noticed when I first started on the dating market, that a lot of people were not doing the same self-work that I was doing. There was a lot of women out there that were not even ready to even have those kind of conversations, number one. And number two, they were not healed from their past relationships. And when you mention something like you're addicted, like you were addicted to porn, they just automatically go back to when their ex-boyfriend 2 years ago was the same way, and they feel like they're going to repeat the same cycle. But they have to understand that every man is different, and how they deal with their vices are different too. And a lot of men live this lie because men are afraid of judgment. We're very afraid of it because the burden of performance for a man is very high. It's very, very high, and especially in the sense of a relational standard when it comes to a husband, a father, all those different kind of things. And you don't want to disappoint people. So you lie to cover it up. But eventually the truth comes out. And then you're standing there with your like hands in your pants, and you're just like, oh well, like you found the American Express receipt of me subscribing to like 10 OnlyFans girls. I can't lie anymore. I can't lie anymore, right? I mean, and I can laugh about it now, but during then, it was a dark moment, right? Because you're like, I was spending like $150 a month subscribing to girls that I don't even know their names. Their name like mythical, like all these random names. I don't even know them, right? And it's so shameful. And when you're thinking about it, you're like, how dumb is that? And once you get over that hump, you realize not only how stupid it was, but how much damage it actually caused, not only for you, but for your relationship at that time.
And it's so common. I'm happy you're talking about it, dude. Like, it's so common with Nice Guy to have like a porn, side or like secret life, because that is transactional, right? Like literally, right? It's like you're giving these women money every month or whatever the arrangement is, and then you're getting what you want. You're getting that sexual excitement. You're getting the videos. You're getting the pictures. Right? You're feeling some level of connection, right? It's not real. You're not dating them, but I'm sure they tell you stuff about their lives, and you feel connected on some level. But I find that's so very common. I wonder if you could speak a little bit more to that of like the porn nice guy intersection, because I see that so often in my work.
It definitely has a lot to do with the reciprocity aspect of it, right? Because the typical thing about a nice guy is that if I give you 50, you give me 70. If I give you 80, you give me 100, right? They always want either the equal amount or more than what they give. That's why they often do things for the praise and for the validation. Like, hey, look at me. Like I write in my book, the nice guy is that typical guy that approaches a homeless person with $1,000 iPhone, shoves it in their face and gives them $5 and records themselves, posts it, and tells everybody how great of a person they are for shoving $1,000 phone in a homeless person's face and giving them $5. To me, that is not very nice. that's like
exploitative.
Yeah, like that's crazy, right? But
Yeah.
it's all about that attention. It's all about that. Look at me, I'm the nice guy. So when you have that transaction of intimacy or sexual access of I'm gonna give you $11.99 a month and you give me everything. And when I tell you everything, I mean these girls show everything. You know what I mean? Like you get to see some of them do things that you've never even seen your own wife do, right? So you're like, I'm paying for this and I'm getting this in return. This to me is a great transaction. I don't really have to have any emotional connection with her. I don't have to tell her I love her. I don't have to treat her like a quote unquote human being, right? And you just use that as the form of, and what ends up happening is over time, the more you do that, the more you lose that human natural element of intimacy. And when you're married or when you have a spouse or when you're in a relationship and you're going through that, it's easy for you to look at the person that you're involved with in that same caliber. You start showing up for them differently. You maybe stop, being as patient. You start being a little bit more critical of how they look or what they do. And you start to have these false expectations of what sex is supposed to look like. And it's an everlasting cycle that makes you look like a fool and makes them feel like they're not good enough. And it's a never ending cycle and you don't understand it until you're in it. And I had an art professor when I was in college. He used to always say the saying, you never see the picture when you're in the frame. And I always live by that motive. Like it's hard to see what you're doing when you're in it. If you're from the outside looking in, you could probably see the disdain and the hurt on your wife's face. But when you're in the moment, when you're in the pain of it, it's hard for you to see all that because you're too wrapped up. You're too self-absorbed. You're too worried about, okay, when is she going to go to bed so I can get my nightcap in, right? And it's like you do this and it becomes such a habit and you don't realize it until it is your ultimate downfall.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it just starts escalating, right? Like you start subscribing to more people. It starts getting bigger, right? You start, like you said, planning your day around it. Like, okay, my wife's going to be at the grocery store at this time. Like, time to get a good, sesh in. Like, it becomes so all consuming, And I like what you said about like the transactional nature of it. Because what I see with a lot of nice guys, and I'm curious what you think about this, is like they're not good at going off script. So they have a really good script. You know, you have those first dates figured out. You know where you're going to go. You know how you're going to impress her. You know what you're going to talk about. You have a very narrow sense of identity. Like, oh, I'm a successful business person, or I'm a, all-star athlete, or I'm, really creative. Like you have your kind of points that you want to hit. But once it goes off script, whether that be later in dating, in marriage, or if conflict happens, you don't know what to do. Right. And like with porn and OnlyFans and all that, like it's very scripted. Like you know exactly what to do. You know exactly how to show up. They know how to show up. It's very safe in that way. But real intimacy is not safe, right? Real intimacy it could be anything. That's the point. That's what makes it intimate.
It's that sense of vulnerability and that sense of unpredictable, right? And it's that sense of when you go off script and when you're hit with that sense of, oh, now this is unpredictable, I don't know how to act. Like you don't have a backup plan, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's no.
So when
no
things,
script.
yeah. So when things go left, you're like, oh, and then that's usually when the mask comes off. That's usually when women are like, oh, wait, hold up, wait a damn minute. This is not the same guy that took me to dinner last Tuesday. This is not the same guy that told me he couldn't wait to meet my mother on Sunday. This is not the same guy, right? And when that happens, a lot of times, nice guys especially, they end up feeling like they're being challenged when they're questioned. And I read this quote once, and it said that accountability feels like an argument whenever you're not ready to be held responsible for what you've done. And that is the ultimate caveat for nice guys whenever that mask starts to slip off. Because when the woman starts to ask questions, or when the person in general starts to ask questions, they feel like they're being challenged, or they feel like their version of what their character is being questioned. But what's really being questioned is the true authenticity of what you're doing. They're trying to validate, is this really who you are? Or are you putting on a mask for me? Right? And then the more that happens, the more quote unquote angry the nice guy gets. And the answers get shorter and they tend to be more distant. And this is when a lot of times where I've talked to girls in the past, they have said that nice guys have ghosted them. This is when the ghosting starts, when the girl starts to question them a little more, or starts to be a little more, starts to inquire a bit more about their motives. And they feel like they're being challenged, and they don't like that because, like you said, they're on a script. When the script is off and they're being questioned, they don't have a plan B for the answers.
And as well, because you could just say the scary things like, you know what, hey, I'm like a little insecure, or I was really trying too hard, but I'm actually really nervous about this next date, or whatever the thing is. And you're gonna have women's gonna be more attracted to you. You know, when she's inquiring, she actually wants to get to know you better. And again, back to what we were saying, it's like it's all of you. So she wants to know your insecurities, even though you don't want to admit them. But I think, yeah, if it goes back to that lie or avoiding or being inconsistent, then they start to really, get scared, right? Because it becomes not safe for them. It's kind of the thing of like why women like assholes, right? It's because the asshole is consistently an asshole, right? Like you might be a dick, but like at least you know who he is, right? He's a very consistent person. And I think women are drawn to that level of consistency because you can trust it. Even though it might not be perfect all the time, at least it's trustable. Whereas the nice guy is like a snake in the grass, right? You can't really trust what he's saying or what his intentions are.
Yeah, it's like up and down. It's like this huge roller coaster. Like you don't know which version that you're going to get on that day, right? And I don't know if you have kids or not. Do you have
I
kids?
do.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So how many kids do you have?
One. I have one daughter.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I have two girls. I have a 15-year-old and a 10-year-old. And I write a section in this book about nice guys and parenting, because it's not just about the relationships that you have on a romantic level. It's those other intimate relationships that you have as like a father, that you have as a son, that you have as a brother, that you have as other aspects of your life that can hinder or stop your growth as a man too. And what I noticed in the parenting realm is that I as much as I was a nice guy in a relational sense, sometimes in a friendship sense, I was never a nice guy when it came to parenting. Never. And I don't know why that was. I was always very, I wouldn't say authoritative, but I was very much like, this is A, B, and C, and this is how we're going to do things, right? And I had boundaries. I had set expectations to how things were going to go. And even still to this day, when my 15-year-old, like, she knows my boundaries, she knows my standards, she knows my expectations of her, right? And I don't waver from them. I don't waver, right? And she knows that. And what was interesting to me was when I started this journey from nice guy to good man in a more relational and friendship overall sense, I started to pick apart the ways that I was a good man when I would parent, right? Whenever a sense of conflict would come up with me and my daughters, right? Like if they were acting up and I had to punish them, right? It was my goal to get my point across, but not to over punish them and not to use my emotions and use them as a way to make a permanent decision based off a temporary emotion. That was very important to me because when they were smaller and they would, have their tantrums and do all those kind of things, right? Of course, you're angry, right? Like, I mean, you've been working all day, you got stuff together, you got laundry, you got food, you got bills, you got all this stuff, right? And then your kid wants to have a meltdown in the middle of Target. You're like, oh my God, if I could just, like, what are you doing? But
very
you're like,
convenient. Yes, they're very inefficient.
Right? But then you have to, like, what I've noticed about a lot of nice guys who parent in a nice guy way is that they're very overly critical of their kids. They're very overly critical. And they're only critical of their kids if they see another kid at a restaurant having a tantrum. They're like, oh man, like, oh, like, they try to put on this act of like, it's going to be okay. Like, but when their kid does it, it's a problem. It's a whole kind of thing of like, it's cool when they do it, but it's a problem when my family does it, kind of attitude. And that kind of inconsistency in parenting causes a divide once the kids get older. I noticed with one of my friends he has a trouble relationship with his father. It's like back and forth, right? And, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not, back and forth, right? But what I noticed, the pattern from the stories that he's told me, is that his father has a huge problem with being held accountable. And I said, dude, like, your dad doesn't like being held accountable for the things that he does. So you have two choices. Either you can stop trying to hold him accountable because you're not his dad, right? Even though you're trying to like help him out, but you can't parent your parent, right? It just can't happen. Or you accept him for who he is, and you, as the good man, you put a relational boundary and say, if you do A, B, and C, I'm walking away. Or I'm not coming to Thanksgiving if you're going to drink, right? If you're going to do this, I'm not coming for Christmas. I'm not going to bring my kids and my family around that because you don't know how to control who you are. It was one thing that I had to deal with it, but I have the choice to not have my kids around it. And that's the huge thing about good men, is that they are able to set relational boundaries, no matter how hard that might be. Friends, family, coworkers, whatever. They have clear boundaries that people know I cannot cross this line. And if I do, there is a consequence.
What I think, what you're saying there is important, especially with family, is that you can have a boundary and still love that person. And I think that's what nice guys don't quite get, right? Because when a nice guy feels a boundary, or like you said, they're being held accountable or they're being challenged, they're like, oh my God, the relationship is over. Like they hate me, we're done, this is now my enemy. Like it's very black and white. Whereas I think the compassionate way is, hey, we have some boundaries, but if you're in those boundaries and we're both respecting each other, we can have fun, we can, have a loving relationship, we can take care of each other. Like everything is all good, right? You can have boundaries and have a strong foundation at the same time. And that level of nuance, I think, is almost impossible for nice guys to understand. You really don't get that until you feel it, until you start acting it out in your life.
A lot of nice guys, for some reason, have this tendency, like you said, to think that like if I set this boundary, there's like they're no longer going to love me, they're no longer going to want to be around me, right? But what I've noticed is some of the best relationships in your life come when when both parties know that there's a strict boundary of we don't talk about each other's wives, we don't talk about each other's this or that, right? Because when you have a friendship or a family relationship where there's no boundaries, people will test you. People will think that they can say any and everything to you, around you, about people that you love. But when that boundary is set, when I like first meet somebody, whoever it may be, whether it be a friend or whether I'm going on a first date, right? I don't talk about politics. I just don't. It's too heavy, especially in the time that we live in right now. I prefer not to do it, right? If somebody asks me what my political affiliation with, I just ask them, what the hell do you think? Like, you tell me, because I mean, what do you think? Because I don't understand. How many black men do you know that think that way, right? So I'm like,
For sure.
just go figure,
Go with that.
right?
Yeah, just go with that.
Right? Yeah. Right. So that's like a huge boundary for me, because what ends up happening is if you talk about that, what I've noticed is that it's very easy for people to get caught up in this made up system of red versus blue rather than tapping into the human element of who we actually are. And we actually have a lot more in common than we do that we actually don't. And I'll tell you a story. I was flying back from LA in 2018. And I sat next to a guy. He was an older white man and he had a MAGA hat on, right? And needless to say, I felt it was very awkward at first. When I sat down, I was like, this kind of awkward. Like, I don't even know, right? And we're both going back to Columbia, South Carolina, right? And he taps me and he's like, hey, this is my first time going to Columbia. Are you from there? I said, yeah, like I was born and raised there. And he was like, well, I have a son that's graduating from Fort Jackson there. He's going into the military and this and that, right? And we're just talking, right? And the whole time we're chatting, I forgot about the hat. We're having a genuine conversation about his son, about the life his son lived and how proud he was that he decided to go to the military, and that, just how proud he was of his son, right? And then he was telling me about his wife, who was from Korea, which shocked me because I'm like, I would never think that this dude was married to an immigrant, like, ever, right? So then, we just started talking about those different kind of things, and we never talked a single thing about politics. He never mentioned, Trump. I never mentioned anything. Like, we just never talked about it, right? But after we landed and we got off the plane, and I told him bye, and he shared the same sentiments, right? When I left, I thought to myself, I said, man, we could have easily had the most awkward conversation about his hat and probably had some kind of tension and anger, but all that disappeared when the conversation was about his son and about him being a father, and I'm talking about being a father, and we're talking about relatable things, right? And it takes a really long time sometimes for people to get to that place where they can look at people and not judge them for their political beliefs, their skin, their religion, and all these different kind of things, right? Because we're all prejudiced in some kind of way. And we all have some kind of prejudgment about how somebody looks or the ways that they do things, right? And it takes a really good man to understand that those things are not important, and setting that boundary of, I'm not going to talk about politics, and I'm not going to talk about, this or that with whoever. And what it ends up creating is a way for you to connect with people on a genuine level. And I tell men that all of the time, because there's so many men that are wrapped up in a woman's body count, right? Or this and that, right? And yeah, some of that may matter to a certain extent, but there's no reason why you're sitting, eating pizza on a first date at 7 o'clock on a Friday night to ask a girl that you've only known for 2 hours, how many men have you had sex with? You can save that for
Yeah, that's not going to go well. I mean,
yeah,
the same as like, yeah, to your story, like being on the plane and you like comment on the dude's hat or he comments on the color of your skin, like immediately, right? Like that's just rude. It's ultimately just rude. Yeah, I mean, one thing I work with my nice guys around is accepting imperfection, which I think is what you're talking about, where it's like people are going to be imperfect, and it's okay when you realize that you're imperfect too, and it doesn't mean that you don't connect with them or that you push people out of your life. It's that, like you said, you find a boundaried, kind, compassionate way to interact with other people or interact with your community, because everyone's imperfect. Everyone's just trying to figure their shit out. And everyone has like flaws and ugly parts of their personality, but it's about real community. It's about being able to connect despite those, right? Being able to acknowledge them. I think that's the difference between a nice guy and not. A nice guy will never acknowledge it. Like a good man will acknowledge it, but it doesn't have to destroy an entire relationship. Like you can deal with that imperfection and you can create connection and build cool shit without that.
Have you noticed working with nice guys that nice guys have trouble changing and adapting to different things? Like they have trouble if like they get laid off of their job, or if like their job changes, or if a certain life event happens. They have trouble adapting or changing. Like, have you ever noticed that?
Oh, well, yeah, for sure. I mean, what I see is I think nice guys have this, I call it the shame fame complex. They both have a ton of shame and a lot of grandiosity. And I think when you're in those two polar extremes, change is really hard, right? Because if you get fired, it's either because you're the biggest piece of shit, or it's because they don't respect you and they've never understand how great you are and everyone's just jealous of you, right? But there's so much emotional baggage that it's hard to like move forward. It's hard to have humility and be like, oh, okay, shit happened. Like it's bad. I'll grieve it, but I'm going to learn from that mistake. I'm going to accept that I'm imperfect. I'm going to try to do better next time. Right? That's a much more evolved way, I think, of looking at things like that.
I feel like a lot of nice guys lead with maybe like their money or like a material aspect of it. So I've noticed that when they lose that aspect of who they are, they don't really have anything else to fall back on. Like as like when you're naturally a charismatic guy, or you're like a creative guy, or this is why a lot of times like the drummer in the band like is more prosperous in relationships than the dude that makes 500K that works in finance, right? It's because the like charisma and the ability to adapt and change is so like heavy, and they can like change jobs and they can change different scenarios. Although maybe sometimes drummers and bands maybe aren't the best men, but I feel like they are good men, right? And in this aspect of like the nice guy versus good man, especially with health, right? When I was a nice guy in my former nice guy days, I write about this in my book. I have this term. It's called easy now, hard later, or hard now, easy later. And what ends up happening is that nice guys choose easy now, hard later when it comes to health, when it comes to fitness, when it comes to a lot of different things. And for me, that was so true. I was eating terrible food. I was staying up late. I was seeing watching porn, eating terrible snacks, not exercising. My body looked completely different than the way it does now. And I ended up getting diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in 2021. And that was my wake up call, right? So I ended up getting diagnosed in February of 2021. I ended up getting a separation from my now ex-wife in March. So I had two things. I had my health and my relationship both failing. And they were both my fault, right? Like I couldn't blame anybody for my health falling. I couldn't blame anybody for my relationship failing. As much as I wanted to blame her for the things that she did, that's her own journey for her to figure out. I have to focus on what I did wrong and take accountability for what I did. And when I moved out, it was my first time living alone. And because I lived with my parents until I went to college. I had roommates, obviously, and then my my now ex-wife, she ended up getting pregnant our senior year of college. So we moved in with each other, graduated, and had to like started the whole family thing, right? At the age of 33 was my first time living alone. I'm living alone in this apartment. I only have a couch, a bed, all my clothes. That's it, right? I didn't have any of the awesome plants that I have now. It was just bare, right? And I'm sitting on my couch and I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck have I done? I have to take this diabetic medication 3 times a day. My piss is like yellow. I have headaches. Like, I don't know what's going to happen with me and like the custody stuff. Like, this, you have all these worries, right? And I decided to go to therapy. I need another person to talk this out with. It was my first time going, and it's strange, especially for a black guy, right? Like I was raised like you just pray about it and you just let it marinate, right? But a lot of times in the black culture, we don't encourage, especially our men, to go seek help, right? So when I did that and I was brought to the attention that I had nice guy syndrome by my therapist and he was explaining it to me, I said, damn, I was like, I do take the easy way out for everything. I want to do everything easy. Like, yeah, I do. And I started thinking to myself, but why? And it was because I get instant gratification. I get instant gratification from eating that sugary snack, from drinking that soda, from eating those chips and doing all that stuff, right? It made me feel good. It was an instant dopamine hit. And when I started to choose the path of hard now, easy later, like cutting out the sugars and, starting to do things to control my like health, not only did I become more mentally clear, but I became obviously healthier. My body started to change. I got off of the diabetes meds and I was able to start this process of becoming a better man in my physical form. Because it's one thing to work on it inside of who you are, but if you're still not eating the right things, not exercising, watching porn, do all this other stuff, it doesn't add up. 1 + 1 isn't equaling 2. So they both have to be synonymous with one another. And when I started to take that path of hard now, easy later, which is the path of delayed gratification, you feel better about it. So I encourage all men to get rid of this instant gratification module of life, this microwave, genre of life where I'm going to put it in the microwave for 2 minutes and get what I want. Put that thing in the crock pot and let it simmer.
Yeah, I talk about it a lot. It's like I think the plight of the modern man, especially the modern Western man, is that life's too easy. And that's a hard thing to actually admit because a lot of guys, everyone's had tough shit happen, right? It's not that it's like, you haven't been through tough stuff, but it's really convenient. And I think new men in this world, we need to bring challenge into our lives, whether it's through fitness challenges, like you said, or diet, or, doing something, really pushing yourself in your career or having a spiritual pursuit or being a good man, right? Like really trying to hold value and integrity. Like, I think it's so easy to be lazy, and to just fall victim to all the marketing and the sugary snacks and the porn. Like it's blasting in our brain all the time, so we have to bring challenge into our life, which for a nice guy seems like the stupidest thing you can do. But I think that is what makes you into a real man, is by, overcoming challenges and doing stuff that you think is really hard.
Of course. And I also want to ask you, I have a chapter in my book called Iron Sharpens Iron. And it's based off of like a verse in the Bible from Proverbs. So like iron sharpens iron. And, I talk about it in the sense of like, good men are the iron, right? And nice guys are not. So when a nice guy is around a bunch of good men and the good men are holding them accountable, trying to sharpen them, they don't get sharpened because they're not iron. But good men can only sharpen good men. Have you noticed that a lot of nice guys tend to have a lot of other nice guys around them, like the yes men that validate their bullshit?
Yeah, and I'll go a step further. I think a lot of nice guys don't have a lot of real male friends. I find that like when nice guys are in places where there's things like male hierarchy, right? Like sports or in the workplace or whatever, they just dip out. They don't want to engage in that. And again, either it's that shame fame thing. Either they say, "Oh, like I'm not good enough to join this team. I'm not even going to play," or they're like, "Oh, I'm better than everybody. I'm not even going to play that game." Right? I think to be in that sharpening process means engaging in competition and engaging in a hierarchy and engaging in a respectful one, but engaging in these male structures. I find a lot of nice guys have a lot of female friends typically, but they don't have many male friends at all. And the ones that they have, it's very surface level. It's just like work buddies or something, drinking buddies. It's not real masculine friendship.
Dude, that is so true. And I think about me during my college days. I had a lot of female friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had like maybe like one or two surface level like guy friends that later ended up being like my best friends like later on in like life. But that's a very interesting point because I mean, what's the chances of like your female friend holding you accountable, right? It's very, very, very low. I mean, women
They won't. Yeah.
hardly hold each other accountable sometimes.
But yeah, like feminine support is like just kind of agreeing and validating, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not challenging. I think that's a more masculine flavor of it, And,
Yeah.
yeah, and also the nice guy is trying to like get laid and is unsuccessful, so you're just like friend zoning. You're in the friend zone with all these women, like so you're not even really their friend either because you always want something more.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
There's always that secret agenda. I think that's also happened. I'm curious as we're moving towards the back half of the show. How do you become a good man? I know that that's a big question, but a lot of people say, "Oh, just be yourself or be authentic." And I think you were talking about this a little bit earlier. A lot of nice guys, when you say that, they're like, "I don't know who I am. I'm my credentials. I'm my job. I'm my money. I'm my car. I'm my, cool house." But there's not really anything, but beneath that. So I'm curious for you, like, how do you start to become a good man? How do you start to really make that transition and break free from the nice guy trap?
I think the start of that breaking that nice guy trap is gaining confidence. And how you gain confidence to me as a guy is that you have to find confidence in something that you're good at, right? A lot of guys are good at, organizing, or some guys are good at, being a leader. Some guys are good at art. Some guys are good at music. There's different things of that, what we're internally good at, right? And what I noticed for me, my confidence caveat was that no matter where I went, I was always the best dressed guy. I like have a very, very good sense of style, right? So that was my way of gaining confidence of who I was knowing that I may not be the funniest, I may not be the best looking, I may not be the buffest, I may not be the smartest, but I'm damn sure the best dressed guy in this room, right? Yes, right? So when you have that mantra of like I am this version of who I am, you can take that confidence and you can build off of it. And you can build your charisma off of it, because once you get a compliment about your like style or like how you dress or the way you talk, or maybe you're into art and you show off your art, you can have that confidence level, but don't make it your personality, but use it as a way to form a significant boundary of this is who I am, I'm confident, and then lead with that later on. And I noticed that a lot of guys, when they find out what their purpose is, and that's usually what they're confident in, whatever you're confident in usually leads to your purpose. And when you're focused on your purpose, you're a lot happier. And a happy man is a man that builds people. He doesn't break people down, right? A lot of guys that bring people down and don't bring them up is because they're not happy with who they are. So when you're happy, when you're confident, and when you know your purpose, that's the recipe for being a good man, because you can build everything else off of that. Because everything else that the nice guy has, it's all rooted in insecurity. Everything, all of it. It's the fear, it's the avoidance. It's the self-absorption of wanting everything for the praise, right? It's all in insecurity. So when you take away that insecurity and become confident in a purpose, you can build off of that. And it's like Legos. There's different levels to it. Like you can build it and you can, be like this huge, charismatic, Casanova kind of guy. And that can just basically be solely off of the fact that that you dress well. Like for me, I know if I'm going grocery shopping, I could be wearing a t-shirt and this hat. I know somebody's going to say, I love your hat. I love this, right? But it's natural because it's who I genuinely am. I wear these hats. It's a part of who I am. And it's a part of the confidence that I exude to everyone else. So it helps me along this journey of picking up those pieces of confidence and doing good. And I say in my book, good men always do good shit. They always do. They never do like really bad stuff, right? And I also say in my book that doing the nice thing isn't always good and doing the good thing isn't always nice. And that's just a fact, because you're going to be tempted with a lot of things in this life of when you're stuck in a bind and you have to choose what's morally right or what's people pleasing. And you have to go with what's morally right over what's people pleasing. And you have to separate yourself as a man. A lot of times when guys are faced with that choice in their 20s and 30s, sometimes it's a big choice that they have to make and they fail it. And it sometimes defines who they are as a man to other people. Like people are like, well, this guy doesn't have any morals. Like he just does anything for money. He'll do anything for praise. He'll do anything for this. He has no stance. He doesn't stand for anything. He'll do anything, right? And you don't want to be viewed as that guy that can be bought, can be persuaded, can be manipulated. You don't want to be that guy.
No. One of the things that I bring up, I studied Buddhism intensely for like 5 years. And the symbol in Tibetan Buddhism for compassion is a sword. It's like a katana. It's called the Vajra sword. But basically, their idea, which is exactly what we're talking about, is that like true compassion, right, as compared to niceness, is cutting, right? Like it cuts through all the bullshit and gets to the heart of the matter. And sometimes that cutting hurts. It like you said, it's hard now, but easy later. It hurts in the moment. Sometimes you got to say something that is scary or that is like a little confrontational, right? But it's the thing that needs to be said in that moment, or it's the thing that needs to be done in that moment. And you're being compassionate because you're not letting that person get away with whatever the thing is that they're doing, right? You're standing up for what's right, and you're cutting through all those layers between you and reality.
Yeah. Have you heard of the old Native American tale of the buffalo versus cows?
No.
Okay, all right. So there was a Native American tribe, and a lot of the men would always tell their younger boys to be buffalo, don't be cows. And what they meant by that is when buffaloes and cows, they're similar in stature. But what ultimately is the difference in between them is how they react when they sense a storm coming, right? The cows huddle up and they run away from the storm. And they end up getting tired, they end up getting out of breath, and the storm ends up catching up to them. So they're standing there out of breath, dealing with the lightning, the thunder, the rain, everything that they were running from. The buffalo, on the other hand, when they sense a storm, they huddle up and they run towards it. And they deal with the rain, the thunder, the lightning, all of that stuff. But when they run past that storm, they're out of breath, they're tired, but they're standing on the other side of the storm in the sun, in the sunshine, absorbing everything that the storm had to offer. And I use that analogy in the book as nice guy versus good man, because the nice guys are usually cowards, which I think is a derivative of the word cow, which they run together and they run away from the argument. They run away from being held accountable. They run away from the responsibility, not knowing eventually it's going to catch up with them in a different way. Whereas the good men or the buffalo, they run towards that conflict. They tackle it head on deal with it, it may be uncomfortable. Of course, it's scary too, right? But when they deal with it and once they're past it, they are on the other side of it, happy to have gotten through that storm, taking in everything that storm had taught them, right? And I really love that Native American tale. I actually learned that the Native American tale from a guy that I met in the airport in Canada. He was a Native American guy. And this may sound crazy, but I had never met a full-blooded Native American until I was like 28-ish. And it was this guy I was sitting next to, and he was like a full-blooded Native American. He was from Canada. And he was like telling me about his language, about his history, all this stuff, right? And then that's when he told me the story about the cows versus the buffalo. And he told me, whatever you do in this life, always be a buffalo. Never be this cow. And he said he tells all of his nieces, his nephews, he tells all his youngins that, like, be a buffalo. Don't be a cow.
Kelvin, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like we could have kept going, but we got to start to wrap it up here. So I'm curious, if people are inspired by the conversation, they want to learn more about you, where can they find you online?
They can find me on Instagram at Kelvin Davis. They can find me on TikTok at Notoriously Dapper, notoriouslydapper.com, and on Facebook at Notoriously Dapper as well. And you can buy my book, Be a Good Man, Not a Nice Guy, wherever books are sold. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million.
Awesome. And we'll have links to all that in the show notes, in the description. Highly recommend checking out his website because he was talking about his fashion. This dude is stunning. So just look at some pictures of this guy, of like how he dresses, the fashion. It is incredible. So that's on notoriouslydapper.com, and check out his book. We'll have an Amazon link in the show notes if you want to go ahead and order that right away. There's a lot of good nuggets in there. So thank you so much for tuning in to the Men's Therapy Podcast. As you know, this is a part of Men's Therapy Online. All of our stuff is at menstherapy.online. We have a million blogs, a million podcasts, more content that you could find. We have all the quizzes. We got, online free email courses, and we have a free Slack community. So if you want to join our community, join our Slack, we're up to about 300 guys on there right now that are all doing the iron sharpens iron thing, right? We're talking about the real shit. We're holding each other accountable, and we're making each other better one step, 1 week at a time. So that's totally free. Check that out. If you do want to work with us, we offer individual, group, couples counseling. So we have that as well. But check us out, menstherapy.online. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week, another episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast.